Imagine walking across a quiet English field, never realizing that you're standing on top of one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history. For more than 13 centuries, a king's final voyage rested beneath nothing more than grass, sand, and the passing of time. Generations crossed those gentle hills without knowing that an entire chapter of England's past lay only a few feet beneath their boots. But then, in the summer of 1939, just as Europe stood on the edge of another devastating war, one careful excavation began uncovering a story that would force historians to rethink almost everything that they believed about the so-called Dark Ages. Before today's episode is over, we'll discover why a pile of rust became one of the most famous artifacts on Earth, why a vanished ship changed the study of history forever, and why sometimes the greatest discoveries are the ones that spend centuries quietly waiting, hidden beneath your own feet. Join me today as I uncover the remarkable story of Sutton Hoo, where ordinary looking hills concealed an extraordinary truth. On July 28th of 1938, archaeologist Basil Brown was doing what he had always done. He'd done it countless times before. He worked carefully and patiently and without any kind of expectation that the day would become one of the most important moments in British archaeology. The estate of Sutton Hoo in Suffolk contained several mysterious little mounds of earth that had attracted curiosity for generations. Yet no one could say with any kind of certainty what rested beneath them. To most people, they looked like little more than natural rises on a landscape. They blended in so comfortably into the countryside that it was easy to believe that they'd always been there. At one point, they'd even been covered with trees. But yet, history happens in places that rarely announce themselves, and beneath one of those grassy hills lay a secret that had survived kings and kingdoms and invasions and more than 1,300 years of English weather. The first clues did not appear as glittering treasure. They appeared as stains in the sand. The wooden timbers of a great ship had long since decayed, but they left behind a remarkable outline preserved in the soil itself. One by one, the iron rivets began emerging exactly where the planks had once been fastened together. As the excavation continued, the full scale of the vessel slowly began to reveal itself. It stretched nearly 90 feet in length, making it one of the largest Anglo-Saxon burial ships ever discovered. Imagine the astonishment of realizing that what looked like an ordinary countryside field had actually preserved the impression of an enormous ship for over a millennium. The wood had long since disappeared, but the earth had remembered exactly where it had belonged. The ship immediately raised questions that no one could answer. It had never sailed from that hillside, so why was it there? More importantly, who deserved such an astonishing burial? In the early medieval world, constructing a vessel of that size required enormous wealth and skilled craftsmen and countless hours of labor. That it had been hauled onto land, placed within a carefully prepared burial mound, and covered until it vanished from memory. That was not just some ordinary grave. Whoever rested there had commanded exceptional authority. Historians today believe that the most likely candidate was a king by the name of Redward. He was of East Anglia, and though absolute certainty remains just out of our reach, sometimes history leaves enough evidence to tell a compelling story while carefully keeping its greatest secrets to itself. As this burial chamber slowly and painstakingly emerged from the sandy soil, the discoveries became even more extraordinary. Gold buckles decorated with astonishing detail, fine crafted jewelry, silver vessels from distant lands, elegant weapons, Coins and other luxury objects appeared one after another. Every artifact challenged an old assumption. For generations, many scholars had described early medieval England as a place emerging from a cultural decline after the collapse of the Roman rule. But Sutton Hoo quietly argued something very, very different. The people who created these treasures understood metallurgy and craftsmanship and trade and artistic expression at an astonishing level. They were not preserving civilization. They were building one of their own. They were forming their own national identity. Yet one part of the burial drew almost no excitement at first. Scattered across the chamber lay hundreds of small rusted fragments mixed with the pieces of bronze. They looked broken and crushed and thoroughly unremarkable compared to the dazzling gold that was surrounding them. It would have been easy to overlook them entirely. Fortunately, no one did. Those battered fragments would eventually become the most famous object ever recovered from Sutton Hoo. But at that moment, they looked like little more than disappointing remains of trash, or something that had been almost succeeded in erasing from time. The truth hidden inside that pile of rust would change far more than a museum display. It would reshape how the world understood an entire age of history. Those scattered fragments eventually made their way into the careful hands of conservators who faced a puzzle unlike anything that they had encountered before. In the 1970s, piece by piece, they began fitting together these pieces of warped iron and broken bronze and tiny decorative panels that looked almost impossible to understand on their own. The process took months of patient work, and with every new fragment that found its proper place, something extraordinary began emerging. What had looked like little more than a collapsed heap of rust and discarded trash slowly revealed itself as an elaborate ceremonial helmet, unlike any previously discovered in England. It was crowned with intricate metalwork. It was depicting fierce warriors and soaring birds and dragon-like creatures woven together so cleverly that one image seemed to become another, depending on where you stood. It was not just protective equipment. This was a masterpiece of art. It was created by craftsmen whose skill rivaled any found anywhere else in Europe. In one remarkable reconstruction, centuries of misunderstanding began to completely fall apart. The discovery reached much farther than archaeology, too. For many generations, many scholars had viewed the centuries following the collapse of Roman Britain as culturally poor and artistically limited. It was a period remembered more for what it had been lost than for what it had been and what it had created. Sutton Hoo challenged that uncomfortable assumption with remarkable confidence. The burial revealed a society that was capable of sophisticated artistry, international trade, political influence, even astonishing craftsmanship. Objects within the grave had traveled from distant parts of Europe and beyond, demonstrating connections that stretched far wider than historians had ever imagined England was capable of back then. Suddenly, early medieval England no longer appeared isolated and primitive. It looked connected and ambitious and remarkably accomplished. Sometimes a single discovery does not just answer old questions, it asks entirely new ones. Then another realization settled over the archaeological world. The world described in the great Old English poem Beowulf suddenly felt much less like distant legend. For years, many readers had treated its descriptions of lavish halls and magnificent weapons and noble rulers and richly equipped warriors as nothing more than poetic exaggeration rather than historical possibility. But Sutton Hoo suggested otherwise. While no one claims that the burial belonged to Beowulf himself, the culture reflected in the poem now had an unmistakable physical evidence standing behind it. The helmet, the weapons, the drinking vessels, the treasures, the ceremonial burial, all of this belonged to a world strikingly similar to the one preserved in that ancient epic. Literature and archaeology had unexpectedly met in the middle, and each one helped explain the other in ways that neither one could ever accomplish on their own. The timing of the discovery only deepened its significance. Within weeks of the excavation, Europe descended into World War II. Many of the priceless treasures were carefully packed away and hidden to protect them from bombing and possible destruction. It's difficult not to pause over that idea and that moment, too. One civilization had buried its greatest treasures to preserve them for the future and for the dead king. And 13 centuries later, another civilization found itself hiding those exact same treasures for exactly the same reason. Across the centuries, the motivations were different, yet the hope remained remarkably familiar. Protect what matters today, so someone tomorrow might still learn from them. Today, the Sutton Hoo helmet has become one of the most recognizable archaeological discoveries in the world, but perhaps its greatest contribution cannot be displayed inside of a museum case. Its greatest gift was changing the questions historians asked about an entire age of mankind. Instead of wondering whether early medieval England possessed greatness, scholars began asking how much greatness still remained undiscovered. Every excavation since then has been influenced in some small way by the lessons learned from that quiet Suffolk hillside that was dug up in 1939. Basil Brown did not just uncover some burial. He uncovered a confidence in a forgotten civilization whose achievements waited beneath the earth for more than 1,000 years, waiting to be found and discovered, and to prove that their civilization wasn't lost, it wasn't struggling or floundering. It was real, it was there, it was theirs, and they were still figuring it out. But they had a pretty solid grasp on it all. So let me ask you this. If there was one place anywhere in the world that you could excavate in hopes of answering one great historical mystery, where would you choose? And what do you hope would be waiting beneath the ground? I always wanted to be an Egyptologist when I was a kid. I think I would probably want to go to the Valley of the Kings and discover some new tomb. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments. What would you dig up? What would you look for? And if you enjoy stories like this, please make sure you follow the History Happens Facebook page for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. And please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Every subscriber helps. I love hearing from you guys, and I have been completely shadow banned by Facebook lately. So every follower of that page helps me to keep doing what it is that I do every single day. Thank you for watching.